evening, everyone. Thank you very, very much for coming today. Welcome to the first KCLSU election hustings here for 2019. Tonight, we will be questioning your presidential candidates on the student issues that matter most. So I hope you all have a few questions running up your sleeve. The purpose of this event is to bridge the gap between the union and the students that it serves in an attempt to improve the appalling voter turnout that the KCLSU has seen in recent years. Too many students remain disengaged with the services that this student union provides, and this event is hopefully about making a step towards improving that. For all of your information, this event is being broadcasted live on KCL Radio as well as on YouTube and on Facebook via the KCL Radio, King's TV and Raw News web pages. And this is all in an attempt to reach as many students as possible and to encourage as much engagement as possible with the important issues that we are here to discuss today. So just a brief outliner on the structure and the line out of the event. There are 5 key questions talking about 5 key issues that we're going to be discussing today, with a Q&A after each question for audience participation. And finally, there'll be a Q&A at the end so that we can talk about any of the other issues that we will have no doubt missed. I also want to say very briefly that some of the candidates, 2 of them in fact, are not able to be here today. But if you are interested in reading their manifestos, please visit the KCLSU website, where you can read them in all of their glory. But for the moment, this is not to take away from the fantastic array of faces that we have here in front of you. And we're going to start with some opening statements, 30 seconds from each of you, if you wouldn't mind. And we'll start with you, Claudia.
Oh, I knew you would. So thank you very much for having me, KCL TV and Raw News. My name's Claudia Watts, and I guess why would I make a good presidential candidate? So I straddle both, KCL and GKT campuses, and I think I'd provide a really unique insight. And yeah, I just want to make sure everyone has a great university experience, and I mean, that's what it's all about really, isn't it? Yeah.
Fantastic. Antoine.
Hello, I'm Antoine Morizur-Bruller. I'm a student. I'm from France, but I grew up in Belgium, Italy, and Australia too. And I'm standing for president because I've been already engaged in my students' community. I've been whole leader for GDSA last year and NUS LGBT plus delegate last year and this year again. And I just think that it's important to engage yourself and to take positions and be a full student, not only listening in lectures, but also being in the part of the student community.
Fantastic, thank you. Shaswat.
Good evening, my name is Shaswat Jain. I'm one of the presidential candidates, and I think how I differentiate myself is the fact that I'm just an ordinary student. I have started from being an individual with no friends to being the president of one of the largest societies at KCL. I have been involved in different campuses, and I feel the only way a president should be is by interacting to as many people, being approachable to many, and just going that extra mile for every single individual. I feel there is no particular skill in me which every one of you in this room don't have. But what I feel I want to differentiate myself is my ability to make sure that I represent everybody with passion and commitment, with 100% diligence. Thank you.
Danny.
Yes, so hello, my name is Danny, second year international relations student. Honestly, I'd just start by saying that something that you'll hear a lot today is the word reform. We need to reform the student union. We may need to reform the safe space policy. We may need to reform mental health policy. But I'm here today to offer an alternative, and that's to transform the student union. It needs a completely different outlook. For far too long, it's been completely disconnected from the people it claims to represent, bureaucratic, unresponsive, and out of touch. As Will's indicated, let's take today as an example. The incumbent for Vice President for Education couldn't even take the time to come here and defend his record today. So I'd just like to say the time's up for those trying to curtail freedom of speech in this university. The time's up for those who are citing meaningless platitudes of liberation and protection. And the time is to take leadership and leadership with pragmatism forward. Thank you.
And last but not least, Carrie.
Yeah, hi, I'm Carrie. I'm doing an MSc in neuroimaging, so I'm based at the IOPPN at Denmark Hill, I know, the Forgotten campus. However, it's like my second year at King's. I did a previous master's too, so this is maybe why some of you might know me. So why I'm running for president is because I have previous experience as president at my old university, and I think it's most important to listen to what you guys want, to take your ideas into consideration, to take your concerns serious, and to change the way how you want the student union to be.
Right. Mental health is a huge problem here at this university. Many people think that it is not treated with the sort of respect that it should. Antoine, I'm going to come to you first. You're nodding away. You talk about ensuring better welfare support, especially by investing in mental health and counselling. Now, one of the issues I have here is how? What sort of practical implementation are you going to employ? It's all well and good saying that you want to improve things, you want to invest, but what is it going to mean practically?
I think that the worst with the mental health support is the waiting time, especially if you are in an emergency, mentally speaking or emotionally speaking. And I also think that the problem is accessibility. So you can't fund it because it's funded by KCL, but I think at KCLSU could fund their own, that will work with the KCL one, but will fund their own counselors and advisors. And especially, I think also that we should fund one for Chinese students because it's the largest community in King's, foreign communities in King's. And for counseling and mental health, it's always better to have it in your own language, especially when it's as different as English and Chinese.
So what is it precisely that you're proposing?
To make KCLSU hire counselors that will work with the KCL's one, including one who will be Chinese-speaking or Chinese national.
Right, and you're confident that you can have the money to invest in that sort of
Yes, by
personnel?
cutting. So I will cut on many things, especially cutting the money we spend on campaignings outside, so political campaigning outside of KCL. I will cut on that, and I will also cut on part-time jobs that I use for only, not for things that are everyday life, like food and things like that.
Fantastic. Shaswat, in your manifesto you say that my fight is to bring more counsellors, reduce the waiting times for students and make mental health services more accessible. So you clearly are of a similar attitude as to Antoine. Do you think that his solutions are practical enough?
I think that's where the role comes in. His solutions, in my opinion, are certainly practical, although this requires a lot of unity and the fact that all the student officers need to work on this together. The role of the student union is to basically become the bridge between the students and the student union. So when we are in this position representing students, it is our responsibility then that when an international student pays 20,000 and a domestic student pays 10,000 pounds of their annual fee of studying in this university, we can have counsellors and we can have those services provided to students. Surveys point out that 1 in every 3 people have some sort of mental health problem. Like even say for instance, if I'm feeling lonely, even that comes under mental health. So my problem over here is, it's just about the lobbying and ensuring that we have these services. It's not about funds which the university does not possess. University definitely has a lot, and I feel when we are working and operating under the National Union of Students, all of us, like at least if the union is more proactive and engaged and committed to this purpose, there is no way we cannot as a unanimous form of student body across the UK not have the funding or implement the ideas which he promotes. Like I totally 100% second him on the feasibility of his ideas.
I mean, Shaswat, you've mentioned that feeling lonely, that is part of the problem. That's not to undermine people who suffer from far more severe symptoms and far more severe issues regarding their own mental health. I don't want to misunderstand that.
Exactly. Like the point is, feeling lonely is one of the way it starts. Like my point is, it can go to suicidal attempts. It can go to a lot. Mental health is something, in my opinion, which is prevalent very easily. The fact that I pointed out feeling lonely was just to point out how basic it can get. Like say for instance, if I don't have anyone to talk to tomorrow morning, that might not be treated by some universities and some students as being a part of mental health. People might think that's not important, but that is important because that will affect how I perform, my well-being, and how I treat any sort of other issue in my university life. So by that I just pointed out to say that even a small concern, like a small issue, like is that significant. I'm sorry if I just didn't present that.
It's all right. No, I quite understand. I appreciate you clarifying. No, let's come to you. You've mentioned this idea talk, which you say is a new weekly group discussion social, which will take place at each KCL campus, respectively. It's about welcoming people along to talk about their issues and their mental health. I mean, many people who suffer from mental health issues would argue that that is perhaps a misunderstanding of how mental health works amongst those who suffer it. Having these sorts of sociable meetings is certainly not something that works for everyone. What would you say to that?
Well, first, I'll just correct the record on that. These socials, which would take place respectively on every single campus of King's College London and at the King's accommodations, are not to talk about mental health issues. They're to talk about anything. So I'm actually quite proud that Shaswat touched on that there, which is the fundamental epidemic, really, of mental health. And that is the source of it, often, is loneliness. And, it's funny because when we come to university, we get told to, be equipped to fit in at university, to bring our textbooks, to bring up our non-stick frying pan. But no one prepares anybody for feeling lonely and for that transition, being chucked into a completely different environment. And so what this talk aims to do is really to provide a solution to this, rather than all hyperbole and rhetoric. And that's to have weekly group discussions where students can come along and talk about anything. There's no agenda, there's no pressure to talk about anything, but it'll help them realise that they're not alone, that they don't have to be forced into a culture of partying or go into a society. Maybe that may not be for them. Maybe it may be appropriate for them to just come along and just talk about anything and make new friends. One other thing I'd say is this is inextricably linked to freedom of speech as well. We are sheltering students in many ways from new ideas and new perspectives. And it's going to come back to haunt them in the real world when they get out there and they can't have the coping mechanisms to deal with disagreement, which is a part of life. So really, I'm here to provide a solution to that. Hawk is one of them. And of course, another one is to provide an online assessment, a personality assessment, which I'm working with a professor on. And that would be to predict mental health behaviours, how to predict people's deterioration in mental health before it happens, because ultimately, I appreciate the question, it's a great question, but we shouldn't be getting to the point where people even have to be waiting in a line to see somebody.
So what you're attempting to do here is try and solve these issues at their roots, perhaps before they become more severe, sort of similar to what Shaswat was saying.
Yeah, in many ways, that's certainly true. We have to deal with it at the root and not flounder around at the branches, so to speak.
That's really interesting. I mean, Claudia, I want to come to you now. This idea of mental health being dealt at the roots, I thought that one thing that I noticed amongst all of the manifestos is that there was a lot of emphasis on how mental health services can be improved and less talk about how we can get mental health to be stopped, for mental health problems to be stopped at their roots before we have to deal with these sorts of things. Do you have solutions like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single year, the importance of mental health is always put across during these elections as well, and it is increasingly becoming a massive issue within our university and universities around the UK. In order of tackling mental health at its roots, I think making sure that people feel integrated and accepted in our university environment is key. So it's really creating people's communities and societies, I think, are key for this. Sports teams, making sure people feel supported and create little families of their own, and then creating their own support groups.
A lot of the solutions being offered here seem quite artificial. They seem quite sort of bureaucratic and structured. In a way, these sorts of issues are solved by things that are far more organic than group meetings. Why should we believe that this sort of solution is the right way forward?
I mean, it's about support, and if we're going to do that, then we need to be supporting our teams and our societies, making sure that they have the funding. Make sure they have the funding to give their members what they need, and maybe also have somebody within the committee who's specially trained to deal with difficult situations and to give people appropriate advice and where to seek help.
That's interesting. Thank you. Carrie, let's come to you lastly. Very interestingly, you train in neuroscience, is that correct? Right. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, mental health did not come up in your manifesto. Could you explain us, please?
Sure, definitely. So this is part of what I meant with making everyone feel at home at King's, because it's what Daniel also said with the roots. I moved out from home when I was 24, coming to London to do a master's, and I still felt very lonely. I didn't have the support system that I had at home. So you get really quickly into kind of a dark hole, put it like that. So, and in order to avoid that, obviously, is to make everyone just feel like they're welcome, they're accepted, they are here at home, because King's is basically our home for like the next few years.
And Carrie, I'm going to cut you off there, no doubt about it. Everyone here shares your sentiment. We want people to feel welcome. We want to make sure that issues of mental health are reduced and supported as best as possible. However, what you're saying is pretty abstract. Where is the practical implementation? Why should people vote for you? Are you going to bring something that will actually change lives?
Yeah, so I also like to go back to that bit, and then I talk about the mental health bit. So in order to do that, obviously, would be, again, to have activities, events going on, just like get-togethers, wherever, like, let's say, at the student accommodations get-togethers, or just, I don't know, like, a lot of different things that people can do. Like, let's say, a theater group, like, just people who like going to the theater. You know, like you could just meet up and just go to the theater. If you like going partying, you could just like, go partying.
But surely you're not saying that that is an adequate solution to this crisis?
That's what I wanted to say afterwards. So there's like a thing that is called peer counseling. And it's actually quite a good thing to do to get, in order to kind of address these mental health issues. It's like, because it could be like a group of students, preferably psychology students. I did that myself at my old universities, and it worked really nice. So we had like a clinical psychologist, and since I had a clinical placement last year, I have a lot of connections in Denmark Hill and at the Morizur Hospital, a lot of clinical psychologists, and just to find one or two who can train a couple of psychologist students in order to do peer counseling. Sometimes it's just better, especially for students, to talk to someone else. Obviously, when there would be severe issues, then the peer counselor has to tell this to the clinical psychologist in order to that this clinical psychologist can then help the student.
It's an interesting scheme. Danny, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'll just respond to that with, you mentioned get-togethers, you mentioned events. We've tried all this. This is nothing new. Once again, we're coming back to the same point, which is, do we reform or do we transform? There has to be a new mental health framework set in place. And that's why, with my plan, which it's integrated in this plan, is an online personality questionnaire, which will basically predict attributes which indicate mental health issues and get to the root of the issue before it gets bad. One thing that also hasn't been touched upon, and there seems a complete lack of comprehension on this from the panel, is social media. We've seen a spike in rates of depression, in rates of anxiety. Since social media has come about, for example, we can see that a 70% increase in girls actually engaging in self-harm, a study by the Mental Health Foundation, and it has to be tackled. So social media workshop and time management on that is also vitally important. It's an epidemic.
Orientation, induction and workshops. I think these are the three standpoints on which I'll stand. From the lecturers to the students. Any international student, when he comes new to King's, everyone comes from a different background, from different cultural hostilities, from different problems and from different standpoints. So their perception of university is very varied. So I think by having more inductions, firstly, the international students in particular and even the domestic students who are from a slightly different background know about how these communities and how every form, like from people of color to widening participation to all sorts of minorities are represented at King's. They should firstly be aware that they're represented. Secondly, I feel the union has to work very well and more engagingly with such unions, because like with a union of £6 million turnover every year, the AGM turnout was 4 to 5 students this year. So I feel by engaging such student officers, like we definitely have more than 5 officers at least, and the turnout was not that much also. So I think making the students aware that firstly we have them, and secondly, one more thing which was in my manifesto was, I feel the lecturers and the tutorials and everyone who's a part of the student experience faculty at King's should undergo some workshops at least, which we definitely can fund, with which they know how they should be presenting certain situations. Like King's has obviously had many cases which have been in road news also previously, wherein a lecturer has intentionally or unintentionally hurt the feelings of a few students. And when in the case of unintentional hurting of feelings, I feel students, lecturers and everyone who's a part of the faculty should understand that they should be participating in some workshops wherein they have develop a strong approach. And answering to what Madhav just directed to us, such different communities, such officers, liberation officers who are working as voluntary students, they should be empowered. They need more power within their domain to actually act. Like, no president or vice president team of just 5 people can actually do everything with 30,000 students. We need to empower our union by actually giving the power to our students and delegating ideas and giving the lead to people who are actually standing for such things.
So you're talking about giving more students the lead, giving more students the responsibility and the opportunity to take the union forward. How are you going to incentivise that sort of thing?
Firstly, I think that could be done through a stronger awareness, like social media was pointed out by him in the previous sense, one of them. Secondly, I feel we need to be slightly strict in some of our approaches at least. Like, we need to, like, say for instance for today's turnout, I think when I was going through all the manifestos, there were 2 times more manifestos of all positions combined than we have the number of people over here.
Yeah, I mean, but something to consider is we're already a diverse student body. We're already diverse, and I'm not going to really buy into this kind of intersectional identity politics, really, because I think it's important to treat everybody equally. Why are we singling out certain students? I don't know if I've been living on a different planet, but where is this racism and Asian discrimination that you speak of? Because I've not seen it. I don't think really people have seen it. Instead, I've got a tangible plan here to talk about diverse and diversity, and that's a multicultural initiative. I think that international students in their first year should be allocated a buddy. It's something which was implemented in the War Studies Society department and has worked quite successfully, and that would be something to help broaden their awareness of British culture and ease their transition into life in London to truly create a diverse society. But
you don't think that's patronising?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's very difficult for international students, in many cases, to come and be built in an environment like the UK and be said, right, it's left to you now. I think that there should be a programme out there, an initiative out there to help their settling in this empty rhetoric. It's like empower and workshops, which have already been tried. What does that actually mean? Actually, Shaswat, what does empower actually mean?
Shaswat, we'll get to you. You can answer that in a second. Claudia has been waiting very patiently.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, yeah, Danny, so you're saying that we are a very diverse university, and we absolutely are, and you're saying that we shouldn't be, singling out groups, and you're saying you don't understand why they don't feel like they're being represented because they are. But that's how you feel. You don't think about these people, these individuals don't feel like their community, their background, their culture is being represented.
Where's the evidence for that?
You would have
Where's the evidence for that?
discussing that.
Yeah. No, but
you were just discussing that you don't feel like people should be singled out and it should be an even playing field.
But you guys have just mentioned how
people aren't feeling represented. People aren't feeling represented, and this is why it is a big issue. This is why it comes up every single year and still nothing has been done.
Claudia, all due respect, you know for a fact people aren't being represented. You know that.
Yeah, I know that.
You know that. What's the evidence for it?
Well, the evidence is that we've got students coming to us saying that they don't feel represented, and they don't feel like their community and their background, their lifestyle feels represented, and that's completely reasonable. That's how these people are feeling, but you're not giving them that opportunity, that voice.
Not giving them that opportunity. Yeah. I think we should be more focused on integrating them rather than perpetuating.
But why can't we celebrate them? Why can't we celebrate this diversity?
They are celebrating.
Why squish it? Why split everyone out when you can be celebrating it?
We are celebrating it. We are a diverse student body. This is a fact. Right. Have you seen the student officers? They're all from minority backgrounds.
Let's go to you. You have also been waiting patiently. Would you like to respond to what Danny has said or Claudia said?
To the empower bit, I would like to say, just as you're seeing the representative bit which everyone pointed out over here, I was the People of Colour Association officer a year and a half back, and the amount which an association lead at King's College London, student union, one of the biggest universities in the world, is £200. I don't think any association, even of 5 people, could function with £200 for 1 year. Events such as this, I was told recently by someone that road is also not given more than £200-250 a year. So I feel over here, with total due respect, I don't mean to disrespect, but my total point over here by empowering is, if you're giving a particular group of people a particular position to represent a particular class of people, by funding, by giving them the right training, at least give them some sort of platform with which they can actually deliver the role they have signed up for. Because if someone is passionate, they do sign up. But what does that passion account for if they don't have the resources to do anything about it? That's what I meant by empower. And if it appears.
No, I'd agree with that. Funding is certainly a problem, and there should be more funding which is pumped into this. But when you refer, for example, to workshops for lecturers so they don't hurt people's feelings, that's a very vague line to go down. How do you determine who's the standard bearer for determining what hurts a student's feelings and what doesn't. It's bordering on tyrannical, actually, when you go down this road.
That's totally true, but in a sample of 100 lecturers, if they go to a seminar and we follow international standards, like there are international psychology classes, like there are various international standards that are working on this. If I'm giving a particular ideology and presenting something to 100 people, at least 5 of them would learn something out of it, and I feel even that would make some sort of difference. And with an institution as big as King's, having a small orientation, if every international student, like 8 to 9,000 students can have an orientation every year, I don't see any reason why 200 lecturers can't have an orientation once in a lifetime.
Engaging with students is, I think as we found today, harder than it might first appear. And for someone to be a true leader of this student union, to be someone who people can look up to, who can want to hopefully be inspired by, how do you fit that sort of qualification, and what sort of schemes are you going to practically implement?
Okay, so definitely, like as I said, like listening to the students is basically being approachable, being like just basically that they know that they can come to you no matter what it is, that they can literally email you, I don't know, like let's say it's midnight and you might still be awake and answering the email, and just really take the idea or the problem serious and just talk to the people responsible for that, basically, so just to come to a common solution. Because I think in order to form the student union, it's always to listen to what the students want. So in order to do that, obviously, would be either to give, like, at the beginning, a survey out per email, or just like on Facebook, or just to talk to the people and be like, hey, what do you actually want? What do you expect me to do as a leader?
And you think people will respond to that?
I think if I would talk to them in person, I would think some people would, definitely. But I think in order to just increase, in order to increase like the student engagement, would be first of all to make them believe in the student union again. So as I said, like by making us approachable, and just be like, hey, I'm here. Walking around the campus, talking to the guy.
I certainly agree with the sentiment, but it's certainly easier said than done. You've mentioned student voices, this way of giving anonymous feedback. I mean, how are you going to make sure that this is not just another sort of echo chamber comprised of the students who are already active? How are you going to make sure that this is a sort of system that gets out to everybody? Because the big problem is the voter turnout is so low. I'm sure you all know the figures. I'm not going to test you on it, but the voter turnout is so low. The problem is not the students who are active and voting. The problem is the students who simply are not, and they are the vast majority. So think about all that.
I think that's a very good way of characterising it. I mean, if we look at the way, for example, you've put a lot of effort into promoting this event tonight, and then we have a complete lack of turnout, that goes to prove, stand as a testament, really, that engagement is not as high as it should be. But one thing I'd say, really, is if we're going to get students more engaged in the SU, it has to actually start working for them. Instead of sloganeering and pamphleteering, I think there should be more interactive engagement from sabbatical elected officers. And this is one thing fundamentally that happens with my plan. Something called Student Voices will come in. This will be an anonymous feedback form that will be circled weekly to address students' concerns. They can write anything in there.
And you really think they will?
I think they will. And if some don't, it will be a culture that will catch on. In addition to that, I'm proposing a new system which will be to rate lecture, to actually rate the lecture that you've been in, and this should prompt a more responsive system.
I mean, there are systems like that already in place. What makes yours so different?
Well, it's not integrated into the student union as we speak.
Why should it be, though? Why should it be?
Why should it be? Because, well, it's a feedback loop, and the standard of lectures will improve gradually if students actually give feedback to the professor or to the lecturer on what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And in addition to that, just quickly, I'd just say that small society events have to be promoted more, even if it's a society with just 15 members. They have to be promoted more instead of the dominant block, big societies. And ultimately, just to go to prove as a testament to the lack of engagement in the student union, we have student trustees. But I bet nobody in this room could probably name every single student trustee off the top of their head. That's because nobody's heard from them. Nobody approaches us. Nobody, in essence, comes to us when they're meant to represent us. So.
Okay, Shaswat, you've been eagerly waiting for your opportunity.
In one bit, he covered one of the points which I was trying to say was the society engagement thing. I think when I applied to King's, there were 260 societies, and every few months I hear a new society being formed. So I presume there are at least 300 societies. Yeah. And with these societies, I think it is this is where the role of the vice president activities and development comes in. The president and the VP AD need to work together to ensure that such small societies, like even the smallest of societies, like he pointed out, are well advertised. Like, I'm being president of India Society, I know that the computer screens and the screens at the shack are meant for a society advertising. But I have never seen more than 20 or not more than 30 societies having advertising over there when there are more than 300 societies.
It's in fact very interesting that you mentioned that about these sort of screens. I mean, you said actually in your manifesto, only 12% of these societies use these in 2018-19. Well, do you not think that there's a reason for that? Simply because these screens don't achieve what the KCLSU advertises that they would. Why would a society waste time with a screen like that, which people don't really look at, when they can get far better advertising space online via Facebook, social media in general?
No, but I think that totally depends on the society, because I feel in my activity and president and treasurer training, I was not even informed about this. It is just the previous president conveyed it to me, so I know about it. Like, if I think it is apt for my society or not is, in my opinion, the decision of the society. And we should at least give the societies a chance. Like, I totally respect your point that it might not be very useful, but the fact that they don't even know, the societies don't even have a forum. When I say, for instance, have to do a collaboration event with another society, I need to find out from my friends who the president is, and then ask them to give a brief talk about me, and then try contacting them on Facebook. Like, I think this is the role of the union and the vice president of activities and development altogether, and not Facebook or my friends.
One other point I want to raise about your manifesto, which I thought was very interesting, that is very much about engagement as well as diversity, is that you say that you want a full-time international students officer. Now, certainly the position you're all going for, and all of the other VP positions, are positions that are salaried full-time. Having an international students officer would be very expensive. I'd like you to comment on whether you think that it would be worth the sort of money. And I'd also like to know, out of all 5 of you, do you think that the presidential role deserves the amount of money that it gets, which is in the tens of thousands? And I'd like to hear, after Shaswat, I'd like to get a few hands up to see. So yeah.
Firstly, I think in a student union which is supported by a college that is paying 80 or 75 million per year for Bush House, 26,000 pounds for an officer that will overlook more than 50% of the students, in my opinion, should not be a challenge. Like, whether we should have it or we should not have it is, in my opinion, it lies in the trustee board, the next KCLSU team, it lies in their hands. But coming to the affordability bit, I think with proper lobbying, this should not be a challenge. Like, I think I haven't been into the sabbatical team, so I cannot be very specific about the details here. But this is an outsider's opinion, that when any student is paying so much to such a premium renowned institution, you cannot say that this is wrong. Like, at least we should see if we should do an analysis, and if we see that it is legitimate and it is apt to have such a position, I think money should not be a hindrance at that level.
Thank you. Claudia, do you think the president is worth that salary?
I mean, I don't.
You don't?
I don't think
so you would be willing to take a reduction?
And yeah, I would.
Okay.
Just because. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, please. Very briefly, please.
I think just in the past, like, our presidents, I mean, they've all been amazing people, and I think they've all been great. But I just feel like there's not really been much change for how much they're being paid. And like, if I'm going to be paid that much, like, I want to know that I'm going to be working for it, and I'll work hard for it. But like, I'm going to have to do it so you guys can see that I'm working hard for it.
Okay. Thank you. Antoine.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's, let's say, really well paid.
So you would take the cut?
Sorry?
You would take the cut?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
After, like, yeah.
Shaswat?
I don't really know the salary, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. Danny?
Yeah, I think we should be real. No one up here in reality will take the cut, and neither would anyone in the audience if they were in opposition.
Yeah, I would say that.
And Carrie, finally from you, would you take a cut?
I think I would, because I think everyone should be paid by what they do, by what they actually deserve. It's like in a job. Like, if you get paid, I don't know, 11 pounds per hour, and you just stand and do nothing, then someone who's actually hardworking gets the same pay, and it's like, yeah, that's just unfair.
So I want to leave the safe space policy, because I think that there is already protection by the law. You can't discriminate someone in the country. But I think that, and it's a bit different than Danny in the way that he says there should be a safe space for which you opt in, while I'm saying that each society should be free to have its own safe space. They can do less, they can do more than what they can put what they want. Each society should be able to have its own laws. For instance, in the LGBT plus society, we do have always sober committee members at events. It's not a compulsory thing. We're not going to impose that to everyone, because if we did do that, it will impose that to the fine wine society, and I'm not sure that they want to have to be sober always. So I think that societies should be in charge of protecting their members and their events, and I think that by dissolving the safe space marshals, we could spend, this is what I said at the beginning, we could spend the money spent on marshals, on mental health, on counselors, and that, we just shouldn't impose on others laws, but we should protect groups. Each group should be able to protect as it wants.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you are, like Danny, hoping to have a sort of opt-in method for safe space. Many critics of this would argue that the sort of societies that are going to want to have safe space policy at their events are not the sort of societies that are going to be inviting controversial candidates, and vice versa. I mean, do you think that perhaps this is a naive approach to just offering safe space whenever it's needed? To either of you.
Can you just repeat that?
So this idea that the sort of societies that are going to invite controversial external speakers are going to tend to not want to have safe space, whereas the sort of societies that
it's not
wouldn't.
It's a fair point. I mean, as it currently stands, we don't have an option. If you submit a form for an external speaker request, you get allocated. It's a precondition. You must have safe space marshals will be present at this event. But anyway, just to divert slightly and go back to it, I'm actually interested in what Claudia said, where you actually said that you would take certain events off campus. I think that's abhorrent, actually. This is my university as much as it's any other student's. It's every student's university. And for you to say subjectively that certain views cannot be on campus, where do you draw the line with that? It's everyone's campus, and this should be the champion of the free expression of ideas. There's no doubt about it. This should be where every single idea should be expressed, nothing off limits. And it's through that we can stamp out racism, homophobia, and all this abhorrent hateful language to the sidelines, cast it out to the sidelines. If someone's espousing hateful language, let's call them out. Let's not restrict them and make those ideas more popular off campus.
Sorry. Claudia in response, and then I want to go to Shaswat before we go to questions.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Like, this is our campus, like this is our home. We should be allowed to voice our opinions. I think and it is violence, like you discussed it earlier, like there was violence, someone was hospitalized. I feel like if societies want to take that extra precautionary measure to ensure that their speaker is safe and they themselves are safe, then we should give them that option. And they should have that option to be able to take their views off campus, to have their discussion, have their debate, and feel safe, and ensure that nobody comes into that room and starts a fight and etc.
So has your position changed? Have you given a bit of room to what Danny and Antoine have been saying?
I wouldn't say my position has changed, no, but I do think that you've had both of you, some really insightful ideas. If you
became president, would you be willing to work with them about this?
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. Like, you have to be prepared to work with everybody when you're in a position like this. That you have to be prepared to be diplomatic and give everyone a bit of wiggle room.
Very fair of you. Shaswat, final word from you. What do you make of all of these opinions a bit thrown around? And I'd also quite like a little bit of a firmer stance on safe space with you. Do you want reform or do you not? Do you think it's good or do you not?
I think it is good, but we need to have some sort of more.
Safe space is good or free speech is good?
Safe space is slightly good. I think
compared to free speech,
I think it's slightly I actually take a very moderate approach on this, because I think both are I don't want to be on the extremes over here, because like she said, she was very correct in saying that we are all growing individuals who will be subjected to different problems. And I think he was also right in saying that obviously if it's our university, I shouldn't be having an event outside. So this has to be dealt with a case-by-case approach, and I totally understand how this is very technically challenging and with the bureaucracy you just pointed out. But we have always pointed out, that's the role we are all signing up for. If there is healthy, whatever we decide on as a student, as a sabbatical team, if we all stand by the same principle, then if we can come to one deciding point, then I see no reason why we cannot. The risk assessment, I had also mentioned this in my manifesto. To get an external speaker, it takes 15 working days, and that, in my opinion, is not really well, because I personally remember an event wherein the KCL India Society wanted to invite a very renowned speaker from India, and say for instance, when you're working with on some sensitive topics, you cannot have very prominent personalities tell you 1 month in advance that this is when I will come, or this is when I'm free.
In the university, many would argue, is an incredibly highly commercialized machine. It's operating with millions and millions of pounds when it comes to these accommodations. Why should students trust you to be the voice that stands up for it and actually makes change?
Well, first of all, there's a limit to the amount of power that we would have as presidential sort of officers in the student union to actually influence this. One thing that we could do would pressurize the University King's College London itself. I do like that application idea that Claudia gives, but in addition to that, I think it's poor circumstances really when you have the university giving new students a binary choice, which is for your first year, you have the opportunity to get these accommodations, you get a allocated one, and if you refuse to take it, you're basically on the street. I think that's a really bad thing. And more importantly, these increase in prices are going to hit people from the working class backgrounds and the poorest people the most disproportionately, and that's not good. So I think what should happen is more resources should be diverted into bursaries for people from lower economically developed backgrounds, and that should be sort of subtracted off any rent. I think that's a much more sort of sustainable system.
Antoine, you were
that's already how the affordable scheme is done. It's depending on your parents' wages, and therefore it's already in place that kind of policies.
But do you think that it's good enough?
Well, I mean, I can tell you exactly what they say. So basically, in the rent settings events, we've got the budget. So we say either we increase the number of affordable beds, but if we do so, we will decrease the money less, the difference, you know. So it's either 100 beds with £50 less or 1,000 beds with only £5 less.
So what you're saying is the guarantee of accommodation is worth the amount of money that people are spending? Because King's guarantee accommodation for people...
Yeah, only for first years, but yeah, they do guarantee, and I think we've got really... The accommodation teams are really keen on that in a way that they're making trust. Many universities ask for you to have a deposit. At King's, we don't ask for a deposit. This means that there's a really high no-show turnout, and this is because we say we guarantee you an accommodation, but if you find better, we will not take your money, we will not take your deposits. If you find better, just go. We're just providing this service at the best we could do.
So would you work with Cut the Rent, or do you think they're not entirely necessary?
Sorry?
Would you work with the organisation Cut the Rent, who are hoping to reduce the amount of rent that students
pay? Well, of course, I will campaign. My goal is not to rise prices, obviously. I'm just saying I also have to be realistic. So I will fight for a decrease, but I'm just saying, honestly, and there isn't that much hope to succeed to have like £100 less a month.
Oh, rather pessimistic, I suppose, but very interesting take on it. Shaswat, what do you have to say about this?
I think this is a matter of student experience, because I remember in first year when I came to this country as an international student, I had to choose between going out with my fresher friends or have a good dinner, like at a good fancy place. So my point over here is, as he pointed out, it's not very much or completely in the hands of the president, this particular task of allotting the rent over here. And this, like from a news article I was reading a few days ago, it's either the National Office of Education or National Office for Students, one of these two, which actually looks into all this. And this, in my opinion, requires lobbying on an international level, because I personally feel it's not in the hands of the president or the vice president or the five of them all together to decide on the rent for next year. This is like, I think, and one more thing which King's, I think like my facts are incorrect, or what I was presented just now was incorrect, because from what I have seen with the people I know, once you have signed a contract with one of the King's accommodation like Stamford Street or GDS, you cannot leave it even if you find another accommodation, unless you find someone who's ready to take over your contract, firstly. And secondly, one simple solution apart from the lobbying is King's or KCLSU, whenever we are welcoming students who are not very well aware of how things work in London, they should be presented with private accommodation opportunity, private housing opportunities and options, in my opinion. Like if I look for a flat, like if I decide to stay in a flat, like that is a decision which I'm taking. That is always, from what I have seen, cheaper than a student accommodation. Obviously, we might argue that it's not good for a student experience. But say, for instance, I cannot afford £250 a week and I'm paying £250 a week just to stay in a college accommodation. I'm anyways not getting the student experience I came here for. So
what are the practical changes that you would make based on that? I
think students should know about the options. Like there are various rental agencies like Zoopla being one of them online. There are so many such options which offer cheap accommodation to students. Like you can get flats. You can just.
So you think the university should invest in better education of the students who are coming to the university?
That's not better. Like that, I think this investment is not much. Like just telling a new student who's coming about it. Like they just need to be better informed. Because when
why would the university do that if it's trying to fill bedrooms?
If it is, that's completely, that comes down to the question if you want to actually get a good student experience or be a money-making machine.
Interesting. Carrie, we'll finally come to you. Again, no mention of accommodation in your manifesto. There's a lot going on here. What is your stance? Do you wish to be someone who's going to lead this sort of movement against rising prices, or are you happy with how it is at the moment?
Okay, so first of all, I live in a private, I went privately, so I didn't even know anything because I was allocated in Stanford and my campus is like in Denmark Hill. I was like, I'm not going to do that. So this is why I'm renting privately, so I wasn't really aware of these issues either, I have to say. The only thing that I would say definitely we should lead that on, like it can't be possible that like someone who can't afford to live in a student accommodation for like such a high price, like I pay £350 per week in a really spacious studio. So, and compared to like, if I think Antoine said like £400 per week for like, I don't know, for like a really small, basically just a bed and maybe a bathroom.
No, the $399 a week is more than just a bed. You've got like a double bed and like a bath and everything.
Oh, yeah, but still, it's like still kind of small. So I definitely would also work together with Cut the Rent. And I think definitely that, that also like as a president, it's also our responsibility to do that. To basically, as I said, like listen to what the students want. We should decrease the prices. We should work with Cut the Rent. We should find maybe sponsors outside of the university who might be able to just sponsor some amount of it. So in order to decrease the prices for the students.
Antoine, very briefly.
Yeah, we already have that. Ben & Jerry's is sponsoring. It's why you have like free Ben & Jerry's and things like that. It's sponsoring. We really like, honestly, I don't want to be like negative and anything, but I think we really do the maximum.
Students who cannot afford, and I, in my opinion, don't find it justified to have accommodations with such luxurious facilities and being charged so much. There are already so many private companies which offer those services. So as a university, you should not target at offering luxury to those who can afford. You should, in my opinion, rather be focusing on students, like at least for their survival of those who cannot afford to stay in such accommodations.
Interesting.
Yeah, super quickly, basically, I agree with what we said, but we do have different kinds. We've got, like, for instance, some are with a bathroom shared, which are less expensive. They're only $149 a week, and which is still expensive, I agree, but it's still less expensive than the $399, for instance, with a bath and everything. However, the thing is that people coming from abroad and really rich persons still do exist. If King's is saying it's shared bathroom or nothing, they will go to private accommodations, while out of the $399, there is some £20 or something like that goes to pay the affordable scheme, that goes to reduce the price of the $149, which is bath shared. It will be $169 without the $399 paying for the one. So basically, if you put them out of the if you decide that people who have more money to spend on accommodation shouldn't have that, they will spend this money on private accommodation, and it will make rent more expensive also for the less good.
So you think it's a good balance at this point, Antoine? You think it's a good balance? It balances itself out?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that if you don't provide luxurious accommodation, there is a market for luxurious accommodation, and these people will go to private accommodation, which means that we will not make benefits on this one, which means that King's accommodations of standard levels will have prices go up. Fantastic. So this is like beneficial to have this system.
What's the one sort of headline policy that if you haven't fulfilled that we can really hold you to account for? So just one thing that you really want to see changed in 18 months' time, even if nothing else gets changed, because I think there have been some big promises, but I'd like to see like one thing that you'll definitely fulfill.
Let's keep this very brief. Let's go along the row. Claudia, can we start with you, please?
I mean, just off the top of my head, but it is something that I think is really important, and I do mention it in my manifesto. So library fines, obviously, we've all got some, haven't we? I've got too many. Yes. So during Rag Week, our money that we pay for our fines go to charity. And I think it is such a great week. I think it's really important, and I'd like to do that every single month. There'll be a week from it that money will go towards charities, and I'll work with societies at King's, so societies such as LGBT+ and also Hot Chocolate, so the money goes where societies would like it to go.
Claudia, a fantastic sentiment, no doubt about it. Giving money to charities is a wonderful thing. Might I just add, though, perhaps you're not tackling the root of the problem there. Lots of people get library fines. No one is really helping them not to. How would you tackle that?
I mean, I do think it comes down to it's a student's responsibility. Like, it's a student's organisation. You can renew online. Like, I don't think it comes down to I have to tackle the root of a person not returning their book on time. Like, I don't return my books on time. Like, I think it really is just, it's down to an individual. Like, it should be, you know, you should be encouraged that you should return your books, but yeah.
Antoine, your policy.
Yeah, so I think the policy I will absolutely need to realize will be to have this summit, the student summit, by the end of next fall. Just because I think it's really important to put everyone, not only everyone interested, but everyone in to talk and to know about, because many people don't know about the NUS and everything like that, and to have references on what people think important. So the NUS, the 40% cap, King's Vision 2029.
How are you going to encourage people to engage with that sort of summit? You can host a summit.
Oh yeah. So basically, I was thinking of putting stands within campuses, and basically also work with KCL, with the teachers and things like that. And I just think it will be more useful to have everyone thinking about it, including the teachers, in events, during events and debates and things like that, than having surveys, because I just think we have too many surveys. We've got after modules, we've got the KCLSU module thing, the library surveys, and I just think like adding surveys and surveys, people just are bored, and you will have like 3 people answering at each survey. It's enough, and it's not connecting people. So I think this will be a real way to improve if we made the staff work with it and make it on-campus physical events.
Fantastic, thank you. Shaswat.
One thing I think I'd be very willingly accountable for every day of my job is empowering everyone, like from the association to the societies. I feel it all comes down, like even my vice presidents and all my sabbatical team, everyone should know that when we are working in a team of 5 in that room as a KCLSU SAP team, I'm not the boss over there. We are all accountable to students, and if all my liberation officers, like if their funding is increased, like I had mentioned, £200 for a people of color association is actually nothing with experience, I could say. Like if all the communities, their fundings are increased and students and individuals are supported and they feel empowered, then this change will come from students. One person can just give his interpersonal skills and his dedication and passion. The change has to come from all 30,000 students. So I would, in my opinion, be held accountable just to empower everyone, like from the association leads to society presidents, to students, to my SAP team and everyone. That's my stand.
Shaswat, empowering people is a fantastic thing, and I think everyone should feel empowered in whatever way they can. But it's a very intangible and forgive me for saying, but perhaps wishy-washy claim that is very hard to hold you accountable to. How are we going to hold you accountable for empowering people?
Firstly, the associations which actually represent all forms of the society, like from we have got Women Association, widening participation, disability and everything, they need more funding, and those officers need proper orientation and training. Because when I became a people of color officer, all I had was a 45-minute training, which was all about telling me what my role is.
So money and more training.
Yeah, they need more training. Like even like I understand we do not have sufficient resources to pay them, and that is totally justified. But at least they should have the funding as an association. Like I don't think £200 like is justified on any grounds, or anyone among the 5 of us or anyone in this audience would say that £200 is enough for a year. Like an association not even being given £1 a day. So I think that's the first step, that we need to have our association and bodies which are associated with to have more money to work on.
Yeah, and I would just add
very briefly.
Yeah, I agree with him, especially because liberation, things like people of color and LGBT have free membership. Exactly. So they don't make money on membership because it's to unify and liberation things. So they need even more money than the other associations that do have fees.
Exactly.
Thank you both. Danny, what's your policy?
Yeah, once again, with regards to that, I don't know what the term liberation actually means. Liberate from what? But based on my first policy, I think that considering that university should be the platform to make you adaptable to the real world and gain real life skills, I think that an innovative idea would be to have real life skills workshops. So, for example, bring in experts of informative talks and seminars on, for example, topics like how to file taxes, how do you apply for a mortgage, what is credit. This is something which is unprecedented, and it'll be actually quite educational. I think a lot of students kind of are blasted out into the world after they finish university and the bubble pops and then reality sets in. And we can kind of bridge that by doing these real life workshops to ease that transition.
Thank you very much. And Carrie, finally from you.
Yes, I definitely think the mental health issue, especially since we are like, at the IOPP and we have like overall like at King's, we have the connection to the mods today, we have connection to a lot of clinical psychologists. So in order to, so I think we should be able to establish the mental health issue in 18 months.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. I'm afraid we have run out of time for questions. We really had to do our best there, but unfortunately we don't have any more time. What I'm going to do now is give all of the candidates the opportunity to make a 30-second final closing statement. Let's start at this end this time. Carrie, okay. Give us 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, we heard a lot today, but I just wanted to let you know, like, no matter what happens, it's all about you guys. Your voice is like, will be heard if you vote for me, basically.
Fantastic. Thank you. Danny?
I think it's clear that currently in its current form, the student union is broken. It needs a transformation, not a reformation. New initiatives have to be implemented into it. There needs to be a revamping of mental health care, tackling with the key root causes. There needs to be an unwavering commitment inscribed in the student union to freedom of speech, to make sure no events, as we've seen over the past year, can ever be replicated ever again. We should be the shining beacon of a university for the rest of the UK and really set a precedent with this. And that's what you'll get with me.
Thank you. Shaswat?
I have been a part of the student union movement. I have been a part of one of the largest societies of Kings. And all I would say is all I have gained is an insight on how students, all of us, face problems of all kinds throughout our journey at university and how this actually affects and torments our student experience. So all I would request is to consider me for the reason that I am a student who has faced challenges, and I feel I should be that one person who's willing to hear to everyone, like as much as practically possible. I want to be that bridge who's there to understand your problem and work towards it. I cannot promise that everything I say today, like all my manifesto points will be covered, but what I can promise is you will see that we all are working towards it together, and I'm working and I will make significant, markable progress, which can be noted throughout the year. So just consider deeply and vote for someone who you think is actually passionate and committed to deliver something to the students.
Thank you very much. Antoine?
Yeah, so I will say that I'm not promising things like some people say that rent will go down and things like that. And obviously it will not happen. I think I've got the experience to work both with the NUS and with the residences and with the KCLSU. And all of that make me having a realistic thing. For instance, as whole leader, I promised things, all were done, like literally all, even the 23-7 noise-free policies, because I'm not promising things that are not reachable. What I promise is reachable, and I've always done what I promised. And also, I would like to say that we do have, it's not about my conclusion, but just we do have life skill policies. It's in residences. It's open not only for residents, but also for all KCL students. And it just made in residences and not on campus for the single reason that people live close to residents. Nobody lives, or few students lives on the Strand.
Yeah, thank you very much. And last, but certainly not least, Claudia.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think kind of sharing everyone's sentiments, like I'm not here to change the world, but I am here to make sure your university experience is everything that you expect and everything you want, and that you feel valued and you feel listened to by your potential presidential candidate. So yes. Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Had a great time.
Thank you all very, very much. I think I'd just like to say, regardless of whether you agree with anybody in front of you or not, I think it's pretty safe to say that their hearts are in the right place and they want to make good, positive change at this university. In the end, so can you, and you can do that by voting when it comes to these elections. You have some fantastic candidates in front of you who want to do great things at this university, so please don't miss your opportunity to make sure that your voice actually is heard. I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of the 5 candidates who came today, who've spoken fantastically well and are probably very tired after nearly 2 hours of pretty intense interrogation. So a round of applause for them. Thank you. I think the last thing I'd like to say is that, if Thomas could perhaps do that, a lot of people here have worked incredibly hard to put on this event, to make this event live, broadcast it live on many of the student media platforms. That involves our tech team up there, our camera team to the left and right. If any of you are particularly interested in what student media does, well, this is what we do. We try and get information out to you, the students, to make sure that you have a good sense of important things like the student union elections. If you're interested, I urge you, go online, visit our web pages, visit our Facebook pages and our social media. We'd love to hear from you, hear from what you have to say. And this entire event is going to be turned into a fully edited film that we will be putting on all of our platforms. So for everyone whose friends and family couldn't make it, they will be able to see it again afterwards. I'd like to give a big thank to all of you, the audience here. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We really, really appreciate it. And best of luck with everyone's endeavours here. Thank you very much.